As people are joining and welcoming, we're just going to give it a few minutes before we start an introduction, but it's exciting to see people starting to join. We have a really exciting program ahead, and it's nice to see the numbers starting up. So, well, always ready to jump the gun, but I'm going to let everybody settle a little bit.
I'll just
Hard
keep
to
welcoming
wait.
everybody. Welcome.
I know, welcome.
Yeah, and the nice thing about it being a recording too is that even if you miss the first, 5-10 minutes of it, you can go back and see what you missed. And that's the nice thing about it being out there in perpetuity. So,
Right. And it'll just be my intro. That's fine. Not the important part. That's fine. But with that said, I think that I'm gonna start. So, with that said, I'm going to start. My name is Jill Kenny. I'm from the Chelmsford Public Library, and this is the virtual program, What is Sundowning, and how is it impacted by the end of daylight savings? So if you are here for that, you're in the right place, which is exciting. We welcome you. And tonight we have a really great program. I'm doing a little bit of housekeeping in the beginning. This is a webinar. So if you are seeing all of us and you are not seeing yourself, that is what a webinar is. We can't see or hear you, but we can have you contribute in the chat or the question and answer format at the bottom. So please do that because we will have time at the end for some questions and answers. And this is going to be recorded so that you can have the recording after to watch again. And I'm going to send it out with links and any kind of information that we share with you. So let's see, without further ado, I'm going to introduce Janine Madden next, who is a co-creator of Thrive and this programming that we're starting together for the library. So welcome. Thank you, Janine.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jill. So welcome, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us this evening for our panel to discuss sundowning and its relationship to the time change coming up in just under a month on Sunday, November 2nd. My name is Janine Madden, and I am beyond pleased to facilitate this new program at the Chelmsford Public Library that we're calling Thrive. It's a new initiative featuring programming designed specifically for people living with memory loss and other forms of cognitive decline, as well as for their family members, loved ones, and professional care team members. Our goal is to provide engaging and rewarding experiences in a non-judgmental, supportive environment, sort of meeting folks where they are to ensure they continue to be a vibrant part of their communities and allowing them to thrive. I had the honor of working in a very similar program called Spark through the Alzheimer's Association when we lived in Colorado a few years ago. And so I'm just so happy that the library here was open to bringing this special kind of programming to Chelmsford. So tonight is our inaugural event. And it is geared primarily for those family members, loved ones, and caregivers as part of our desire to provide information, education, and resources which may be helpful to you as you walk this journey with your loved one. We'll be having another Thrive event on Saturday, October 25th at the library, especially for you and your loved one to attend. It'll be an art appreciation event with more information coming soon. We are incredibly lucky to have three amazing panelists joining us tonight, and I'll introduce them in order of their appearance or their talking with you all tonight. April Hunt, the Elder Support Services Coordinator from our very own Chelmsford Senior Center. April has been working with older adults with Alzheimer's and dementia for over 9 years. She is the manager of the Companion Respite Program, which provides socially engaging companions to local older residents in their homes, many of whom have Alzheimer's or dementia. And these visits give the family caregivers a few free hours to take care of their own errands, visit with friends, or even just to concentrate on their own mental well-being. She also co-facilitates the Chelmsford Senior Center's Alzheimer's Dementia Caregiver Support Group, which meets twice a month on Zoom. And her educational background is in psychology and community social psychology with a concentration in older adults. Sarah Turcotte, area community liaison at EPOCH Senior Living, supporting the Bridges and Waterstone communities. Sarah specializes in memory care and support for local caregivers. She is a certified dementia practitioner and has worked in dementia care for over 20 years in various roles. Currently, she works within the healthcare field and collaborates local professionals to support and coordinate resources to help area families who are caring for a loved one with memory loss. She also helps to support community engagement opportunities for local families, from support groups to memory cafes, which is how we met. And Nicole McGurran is the Programs and Services Director at Alzheimer's Association Massachusetts New Hampshire chapter, where she oversees caregiver support services and community outreach and engagement. She has over 20 years of experience in dementia care in a variety of settings, working with both people living with Alzheimer's and their care partners. Just a brief outline for this evening. So we'll start off with April, who will give us an introduction to the concept of sundowning. Sarah will move into some ways to address and mitigate those behaviors that might come up. And Nicole will provide some family member and caregiver resources, as well as address ways to reduce caregiver stress. She's also offered to help us monitor the Q&A. So if you have a question for the panel, just pop it into the Q&A. We've left about 10 minutes or so at the end to address your general questions about the topic. And with that, we'll go ahead and start. April?
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. I'm glad to be here and I welcome you all. I'm going to share my screens. Can sharing be turned on? Okay. I don't know where Jill went. Jill, can you turn on the sharing?
It's all set.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Hope you all can see this. Okay. I'm just going to go over some quick things of what sundowning is, the triggers and behaviors that you may see, and a couple of intensifiers. Okay, sundowning is not a disease. It's a term, or sometimes called a syndrome, that describes a set of behaviors that may be exhibited by someone living with Alzheimer's or dementia. These behaviors typically start to come out or are more noticeable in the late afternoon or dusk, and can continue throughout the night. 1 in 5 people with Alzheimer's may experience sundowning. They may have good days and bad days or difficult times. We're not saying it always happens, but there may be something that triggers it, and it could be worse on some days than on other days. The exact cause is not known, but it could be due to disease progression in the brain. And that's especially the changes in the circadian rhythm that you will notice come the time for the time change. This also can be together with the decreased production of melatonin, which is a hormone that helps people sleep. And without that, or as that lessens, they do sleep less, which may make them a little cranky the next day. Some behaviors that you may see, or you may already be seeing in a loved one, is confusion. That may increase as they could be going along during the day, and say around 3 or 4 in the afternoon, they become very confused. You may even see this if they see themselves in the mirror. They may not recognize their own face and be confused at who this person is in the house that's looking at them. They may have increased in anxiety or agitation. You may just pat them on the shoulder or something, and they might pull away and say, why are you touching me? They may have increased mood swings. They could be wandering, something that maybe you never noticed before, but then they start wandering and looking for something. They may be looking for to go home, and you may say, well, you are home, but they're looking for maybe their childhood home. They could be pacing back and forth. They may be trying to self-soothe by rubbing their hands or their arms. They could start crying. They could be hallucinating. All of these things could be coming out as the day gets darker earlier. And when I wrote down unsure footing, sometimes as it gets darker earlier, shadows can play a part and what they see and maybe increasing their hallucinations. They may see a throw rug and think it's a hole and may not want to walk towards it, or their perception of depth may be hindered and they're going down steps and they're not sure where the last step is. They could become frightened or alarmed for no apparent reason that we can see, but to them, there's something going on that's scaring them. They may start shadowing their caregiver or other people in the home. It's a sense they're trying to feel safer. So by shadowing somebody, it's a way to try to make themselves feel safer. And in some cases, they may become aggressive or even violent. You may have a wonderful grandmother who has been the sweetest person, and all of a sudden she starts with some salty, colorful language that maybe you only hear among sailors or something, but that could happen. Some common triggers for sundowning is definitely daylight savings time is one of the triggers. And it's a trigger because the changing light patterns or low light patterns can happen in the house or around the house or outside. They can no longer see the yard or what's going on that they could maybe a couple of days ago. And this can increase hallucinations. There may be a disruption in their established routines. Just because they have memory issues doesn't necessarily mean they have intelligent issues. They will know that dinner is now an hour earlier or an hour later, and they're like, wait a minute, that isn't how it goes. And we just went for a walk yesterday and it was light out, and today it's dark out. So they do notice these things, and they may not be able to remember why there's a change. And that gives them an uneasy feeling and they don't feel as safe or as comfortable. A change in a person's surroundings can trigger it. You may maybe change the furniture or take a picture down that's been up for a long time, but it's a source of comfort for them. And when it's been changed around, something has been disrupted in their world, and maybe they can't express it, but they know something has changed. And change isn't always good for people with Alzheimer's or dementia. Overstimulation in an environment. If you have people over or the grandkids come over or something and they're all singing and the TV's on loud, that a lot of overstimulation can bring on sundowning or intensify it, make it worse. Picking up on the stress or agitation of people around them. A lot of times with the caregivers that I work with, they'll come home from a day of work, they're tired, they got to get dinner on the table, they got to throw in some laundry, and their loved one with Alzheimer's or dementia is asking questions and saying, what's for dinner, what's for dinner? And after a while, the caregiver may say, oh, I've already told you that. And they start to get aggravated and, agitated. And now the person with Alzheimer's or dementia is picking up on that. And then they start expressing agitation or stress. Depression can also be something that will trigger sundowning. and fatigue. If, as the change in time goes, as I mentioned earlier, the lack of melatonin, and as people get older, sleep doesn't come as easily as it used to anyway. So now they're tired, and a lot of us get cranky if we're tired, but that it can make it worse when you have dementia or Alzheimer's. And sometimes they can't, if they've been taking naps and they wake up, there's a sense of confusion of what is now reality as compared to the dream they just had. And there are some intensifiers to sundowning, things that will make him even worse. There could be physical factors such as a UTI, or maybe their hearing, maybe they need hearing aids, but sometimes people with Alzheimer's and dementia don't know how to express that to their family. But maybe their vision is going and they can't see things as well, and things are getting more and more scary looking. Maybe they're seeing shadows. They could have migraine or they're constipated. Again, a lot of folks with dementia or Alzheimer's don't always know how to express these or find the words to tell their loved ones that these things are going on. Sometimes being forced to do something that the person can no longer do, like remembering names, like if somebody comes over and you say, you know who this is, you remember who Bobby is, and the person doesn't. But that can get them aggravated or upset, or because they know people are looking at them and they're like, oh, I should remember who this is. They're telling me this is my grandson. But if they don't, that those kind of things can make them feel very uneasy. And same, sometimes you can tell a loved one, oh, it's time for your bath or your shower, go take a shower. But a lot of times they may have forgotten the routine or what comes next, and that can bring on more stress. They could have been doing crossword puzzles all their life, but now they don't know, or they can't see as well, and they don't know how to do the puzzle anymore. But we keep thinking that they can. Loss of freedoms. If they can no longer drive, but that to them, think about any of us. If we can't drive, or our freedom to go wherever we want, maybe they used to walk the dog and now they're being told that, no, you can't walk the dog anymore because sometimes you can't find your way home. Loneliness, lack of socialization, or if it's the same person in the house, maybe they're caregiver, but they're not seeing new people and talking to new people and hearing new voices or getting just one-on-one attention from somebody. And believe it or not, interactions between medications. So if you're starting a loved one with a new kind of medication, check with your doctor to see if it could, interact with other medications that they are on. If I have time, I'd like to do a really quick story and see, this may kind of, people may be able to relate to what's being said in the story. It's from the Dementia UK. And a daughter had reported that her mother's sundowning was becoming worse it started after the death of her father. And in the early evening, the mother would become more agitated and verbally hostile, growing anxious that her late husband had not come home yet. She had forgotten that he had passed away. And so a nurse was able to advise the daughter on some of the reasons that the changes of her mother's behavior during the early evening, suggesting that the mother was likely struggling to adapt to a new evening routine, which differed from her old one and thus increased her fatigue and confusion. For the mom was envisioning her earlier life routine. She was the one who made dinner, not the daughter, but now the daughter is doing it. The nurse also encouraged the daughter to reflect on her mother's past routine in the evening and how this may have been how it's different now. The daughter could identify that when she and her sisters were younger, the mother had been very busy preparing the evening meal, caring for them all along, doing household chores. Now that the evenings were more relaxed, it's more than likely that this is not what felt normal to the mom. So with that in mind, they were encouraged to maybe include the mom back into the routine, maybe give her something simple to do for the dinner preparation, maybe fold some laundry, or maybe even read some bedtime stories to the grandchildren as a way of letting her know that the day's kind of winding down and it's getting ready time for bed. And the daughters they were also maybe talk about when the father was, what was his routine. And come to find out, he was the one who went around and made sure all the doors were locked. That way everybody was in, closed the curtains so that now they're ready for evening. And then even talk about what dad used to do. Was he the one who cut the turkey, and was he the one, who said prayer, or whatever it is that dad did? Just even reminiscing with mom could help. So it's just not always even so much the chores or the routines, but it's how the mom felt when the dad was there and that she felt safe. So that's something, if you are experiencing that with someone, as I wind this up for everyone, making them feel safe and secure in their home is very helpful. So I will pass it on over to the next group.
Thank you
Oh,
so much.
that's my info if you need it. All right. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, April.
Okay, I'll stop sharing.
So I'm going to allow and pull this up. Give me just one moment. Make sure I can get my screen up. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. How are we looking? Good?
Looks good.
Thank you. All right. Well, hello again, everyone. Sarah Turcotte here with Bridges by EPOCH, and I'm here to share a little bit more about daylight savings time and helpful caregiver tips. So let's dive in. So give me 1 second. I just got to move a couple things on my screen here. There we go. So time change disrupts internal clocks and natural rhythms, as April shared. It's known as the circadian rhythm. This can impact mood, sleep, and behavior, as April shared. Routine is truly critical for people with dementia. Even small changes can cause confusion. Believe it or not, it says here, in healthy adults, it can take 3 to 7 days to adjust to a time change. For people with dementia, this adjustment can take a much longer time, sometimes several weeks, even if at all. Poor sleep can make cognitive symptoms worse during the day and create, more confusion and memory problems and even outbursts. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we can incorporate things to have a better night's sleep and better manage these symptoms. It can take, as I said, 3 to 7 days for someone to adjust to a time change and much longer for someone with dementia. Time changes can intensify sundowning symptoms, as April shared. Early sunsets may increase confusion or anxiety or restlessness, and being prepared with small adjustments can truly make for a smoother transition. So what can we do? Increase tips for easing daylight savings time. Little things like increasing daylight exposure, making sure are we opening the curtains, sitting outside, or going for a short walk during the day. Getting this extra sunlight really helps. That extra vitamin D, you're getting that sunlight, that exposure, that natural bright light. If you're getting your loved one outside, or even some people even have used a light therapy box, which you can look into. It's a newer thing that people are utilizing. And if you are getting this light in earlier during the day, or even using something like a light therapy box during the earlier part of the day, it kind of helps to reset someone's internal clock. In the evening, redirect with the light activity. I just want to talk a little bit more on light. So as the sun goes down, little things like gradually turning on the lights in your home to reduce the contrast between the daylight and darkness will really help. So before it starts to get, dark outside, doing things like turning on your lights ahead of time and getting as much brightness into the room can actually help to manage these symptoms. As April was alluding in her kind of the story about the person's mom, in the evening, if we're trying to redirect with a light activity or doing some type of routine in the house that might help, it could be helping to make dinner. It could be folding laundry. I definitely recommend music. I mean, music is one of the most therapeutic things we can engage in. Keeping in mind the tone of the music, if we're getting towards these sundowning hours and we're seeing someone who's anxious, we don't want to play music that's too upbeat. Playing something that's a little more instrumental and calming can really help set the stage and just really thinking about more of a calming activity than something that's going to bring our energy levels up. Again, using the lighting strategically to reduce shadows and dark corners that might look frightening. As April shared, people living with dementia, they can experience depth perception issues, and it can be difficult. Again, walking upstairs, color contrasting can be difficult to navigate. So another thing to consider is gradually shifting a routine. When we're looking at this routine, actually, if you actually Google, oh my goodness, sleep, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm drawing a blank. Sleep hygiene, thank you. Sleep hygiene, there's a lot of great things that you can incorporate into your nightly routine that can help you come up with a nice routine. And when you're looking to adjust these schedules, you want to do them a few weeks ahead of time. So I'm so glad we're doing this program tonight so that you guys can prepare in the coming weeks. They say to adjust things like dinner to be 10 to 15 minutes earlier over the next several days leading up to the time change. Same thing with maybe your bedtime, or if you are doing activities like cooking dinner or doing puzzles, trying to shift things up by 10 to 15-minute increments until you get to that hour will help to adjust. I mean, I hate to use the kind of reference, but we kind of do the same thing. I have a young one, and when we're getting ready from summer vacation to school, we, don't just keep going to bed late and waking up later. We're, getting people to, put to bed earlier so that we can adjust our bodies and schedules. Give me 1 second. Trying to change my screen here. One moment. Thank you. All right, so more tips here to easing daylight savings time. You want to stick to a consistent sleep schedule as much as possible. We really do thrive on routine. Even people who don't have dementia, studies show that when you go to bed around the same time on a consistent basis, that you actually fall asleep easier and stay asleep longer. So it really is important to try to develop a routine and schedule that you can stick to because it does help you get your best night of sleep. And truly thinking about how much we're engaging during the day. And that's engagement with both physical activity, social activities, and cognitive activities during the best time of day. A lot of times, for folks living with cognitive impairment, a lot of their best times of day are typically earlier or midday when there is sunlight and our energy levels are the highest. So some more tips, keep naps short. If your loved one is someone who naps, you want to try to keep those nap times a little bit shorter so that it doesn't interrupt their sleep at night as much as possible. You also want to limit caffeine, alcohol, and sleep aids around the time change, since these can worsen confusion. And when you're thinking about caffeine, it's not just, coffee and tea. You're also thinking about, chocolate has caffeine in it. There's other foods that you might be eating that can consist of this. So really looking at your diet, which we'll talk a little bit about as well. And bright light therapy has been shown to improve sleep and reduce sundowning symptoms with those with dementia. So here's a little quick case study. Sundowning during daylight savings. Maria's husband, James, always became restless around dusk. After the fall time change, his anxiety worsened. Maria began adjusting his dinner and bedtime routines by 10 minutes each day before the change. She also opened the curtains in the morning and took short walks to increase daylight exposure. Within a week, James was calmer and evenings became easier for them both. The key takeaway, small, gradual adjustments and extra daylight can ease the transition. So nutrition and mealtime. Proper nutrition supports overall brain function and can help manage dementia symptoms. Believe it or not, one of our most requested topics is proactive brain health. There is true medicine in the foods that we eat. Good nutrition also supports better sleep and overall physical health, and that's why making mealtime work is so important. Some suggestions and tips. Maybe if your loved one might do better with serving smaller, more frequent meals if larger meals are becoming difficult. I know a lot of times we get accustomed to breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and that's when we eat. And I think for some folks, our appetites do adjust, and sometimes eating smaller meals throughout the day makes it a little bit easier to get that nutrition in. And also, like April said, I don't know about you, but when I'm hungry, I might not be my best self. So making sure that we're feeling full and comfortable. Again, along the lines of routine, keeping our meal times consistent with each day, it is so important. It really does develop like a physical memory when we are keeping meal times and kind of like activities in a more routine basis. People almost know what to expect and develop a physical memory when we are developing these routines and doing things on a consistent time. Use simple table settings. We were talking earlier about visual perception. Busy patterns can be difficult for people with dementia to navigate. You want to keep the place setting simple. Sometimes people will use, if a different type of plateware. Some people use what they call like a fiesta ware so that the food looks a little more apparent. If you think of something like a white plate and you're serving white mashed potatoes with a white fish, sometimes you need a little contrast. And if you're not doing it with your plateware, maybe some herbs or something to brighten up your plate. And again, just keeping your table settings very, very simple. Sometimes it can be overstimulating to have to navigate too many utensils or things on the table. Maybe serve one or two items at a time. And if you're noticing that your loved one is having a difficult time manipulating the utensils, before we go to feeding or helping, maybe we provide finger foods or pre-cut foods to help someone stay and maintain their independence with that feeding capability for as long as possible. You definitely want to encourage this independence. It's one of those things where if we're not utilizing these skills on a consistent basis, you don't use it, you lose the ability. So you really, truly want to encourage this independence and get adaptive with utensils or cups. Some people need like a weighted utensil or a cup with a handle. So really, talk with, look for other options if you're noticing your loved one, going through mealtime independently. There are ways you can adapt it to have them do this for independent as long as possible. Again, eating together and modeling the behavior. They see you eating and utilizing doing the eating motion. A lot of times they might follow along and do it with you. That's the same for many different activities, kind of modeling and wanting to help be a part of what you're doing. And really not sweating the small stuff. If things are, messes are happening or spills are happening during the mealtime, try not to get too stressed about it, and try not to sweat the small stuff, because as April shared, people living with dementia, they feel your energy. Actions truly speak louder than words, and oftentimes they understand your body language more so than the words that might be coming out of your mouth. So here are some tips for meaningful activities. Meaningful tasks and interactions can improve mood and decrease challenging behavioral symptoms. Truthfully, I think, in my opinion, that, engagement, social engagement, and meaningful activities for someone with cognitive impairment is almost better than some of the medication that's out there. And there's great medication to treat. I don't get me wrong, but engagement and stimulation is one of the best things someone can do if they're living with a cognitive impairment. It is so good for their brain engagement and proactive brain health. So for some tips for meaningful activities, you want to try to offer activities that stimulate all the senses. You want to think about art, music, touch, maybe getting into nature. And when you're thinking about some of these options, maybe even thinking about what someone might have enjoyed, and maybe they used to, love to do watercolor painting, but they haven't done it in a long time. Why is that? Does it need to be adapted? Kind of like we were talking about the dining experience. Sometimes these activities they once enjoyed, or maybe they've never tried, and you want to give them a go. You want to think of activities that are going to stimulate all the senses, and how are we going to adapt it so this person can enjoy it? Include pets whenever possible. A lot of great interaction can come from pets, pet therapy. If you don't own a pet, there are actually some wonderful places locally that you can get these interactions, whether it's, it could be, as something as volunteering for an animal shelter, or there's actually there's a few local horse farms that I know some caregivers and families I know have visited, where you can volunteer and brush horses. Or if you have a family friend that has a dog, maybe you ask to visit or go to visit them to spend some time. It can really reduce stress and depression spending time with animals. Choose activities that are based on interest in someone's ability. Again, I mean, people a lot of times will thrive on interests and abilities that they've had for years. And it's, something that they're proud of. And, again, it's how can we adapt them so that they feel successful? I think of the watercolors. Someone who used to be a artist, they might get overwhelmed if all the art materials are on the table at once, or they have to get the water and set it up. It could be too many steps or too much of a process to engage. They get overwhelmed and, again, overstimulated. But would they engage if everything was simplified and less colors and everything was set up on the table and ready to go? And again, everyone will be different, but it's all, I think, in if there's interest there, and how do we set them up for success? And again, you want to focus on the enjoyment of the activity and not just getting the end result. It's really about the process. And are we laughing? Are we talking? Are we sharing stories? It's not about the end result. You could work on a project or a puzzle or artwork for several days, and until you get to an end result. Or even if you don't get to the end result, if you're enjoying the process, that is what is the most important. You really want to be thinking about supporting someone's dignity and self-esteem in every activity, and play the role of encouragement and enthusiasm so that they don't get discouraged. So just some takeaway tips to remember: we can't change the disease, but we can adjust our approach. You know, the behavior has a meaning, so look for the need behind the action. You know, if we see someone is agitated, as April shared, are they feeling safe? Is there enough light in the house? You know, is there soothing music? What do we need to do? Because every behavior has a meaning behind it. Try to be creative, flexible, and patient. And just remember what works today might not work tomorrow, and always keep your sense of humor. I hope I didn't take too long so that our next speaker, Nicole, can have some time to share on caregiver stress and tips.
Thanks, Sarah. That was great. And I'm sure I will also reference lots of things that you just said in my presentation. So if everyone could just bear with me for a second, I'm going to bring my slides up. Are you guys seeing my slides?
We are.
Okay, all right. So I was asked today to talk about managing the stress of caregiving. Many of the behaviors that Sarah and April talked about certainly can understandably cause some stress for caregivers. So there are a lot of caregivers in the United States. There are nearly 12 million Americans who are providing unpaid care to people living with dementia. And our recent facts and figures report at the Alzheimer's Association shows that we are now saying that 7.2 million Americans are living with dementia. For many years, we were hovering around the 5 to 6 mark, but those numbers really are increasing. And caregivers are busy doing, as you can see on this slide, busy doing many things in addition to providing care for their loved one. Many of them are also working. 6 in 10 caregivers are employed. Many are taking care of both the younger and the older generation. An important thing to keep in mind is that the majority of caregivers are women. I also want to add, too, that I think there's a lot of caregivers out there that don't even consider themselves a caregiver. They often think that they're just a family member who's doing what they need to do. But it's important to remember that that caregivers are taking on some extra duties. It's a really important job, and there are a lot of resources for caregivers, which we're going to talk about tonight.
Nicole, I'm just going to
Yeah.
stop you for 1 second.
Sure.
Do you just go into play mode on your slideshow so that the slide is the only thing on the screen? We're seeing all
Sorry
of it.
about that. I am seeing that on one screen and not the other. So
Not a problem. I just wanted to get the full impact of each slide.
hold on, I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. I don't know why it's not letting me do that. Is that better, Janine?
Yes, thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you for telling me. It looked right on one screen and not on the other. So caregiving does have some serious impact on the people who are providing that care. Research does show that caregivers for people living with dementia experience higher levels of all kinds of stress, emotional stress, physical stress, and financial stress than caregivers for people without cognitive impairment. And specifically looking at those caregivers who provide care for those with dementia, about 60% report emotional stress, and about 40% report experiencing some level of physical stress. So why is dementia caregiving different than caregiving for older adults without cognitive impairments? And we've heard, April and Sarah just talked a lot about behavior challenges in reference to changes in physical abilities that really do contribute to that stress level. There are some things that are very particular, I think, to Alzheimer's and other types of dementia that do make it particularly stressful. Some of those include that loss of judgment and ability to communicate, which I think that we all we take that for granted. And when that is diminished, that can be stressful. Many people with Alzheimer's and other dementias do not understand that they have a disease and don't comprehend that they have any impairments, which can cause a lot of challenges when you're trying to provide some assistance. Changes in personality and behavior can also be difficult, both to see in your loved one, but also can be related to people feeling a stigma associated with dementia, maybe some embarrassment, maybe a tendency to isolate because of those changes. Another factor that is particularly relevant with dementia is that it is a disease that gets worse over time, and worse over time, and also can be unpredictable in terms of how much assistance is needed. We know that the length of caregiving for people with dementia can be particularly long. People living with dementia can live anywhere from about 4 years post diagnosis to more than 20 years. And that's a really long time to be providing support for a loved one. And then the final thing I want to mention in terms of dementia caregiving in particular is that it often does result in some sleep deprivation, which is related to the topic we're talking about tonight with this phenomena of sundowning, where certainly those behaviors can continue well beyond the time when the sun goes down and not only impact the person living with dementia and their sleep, but also their caregiver who may not feel safe to go to sleep and may be missing that sleep on their own. In particular, these challenging behaviors that have been talked about tonight include agitation and aggression, wandering, repetition and confusion, and perhaps resisting help with care. And I just want to highlight that while those behaviors can certainly increase or may have a new onset during the time change, they can also happen at any time of the year, at any time throughout the day. And all the great tips that you heard from Sarah and from April, they certainly are applicable regardless of what time of day people are experiencing those behaviors. And lots of that routine that Sarah just talked about so helpfully, that certainly can reduce these challenging behaviors throughout the day, not just in the evening time. But these dementia-related behaviors can intensify stress because they can be unpredictable, they can cause safety concerns and emotional stress. And it's important to always remember when you're addressing these behaviors that while somebody may look just like they did before, and maybe in some ways they might not seem unwell, that these behaviors really are symptoms of the disease. They're caused by changes people are experiencing to their brain, and they're not intentional. It's important to, so in terms of that stress, on this slide, you will see some of the common warning signs of caregiver stress. I think some of which I think are common sense. I think lots of us picture people feeling maybe anxious, maybe having some depression, but we often see signs of caregiver stress being people denying that they need help, perhaps, or denying that their loved one is as bad as things are. Sometimes people react with anger. And irritability. Sometimes we see people with having trouble paying attention because of stress. In fact, it's not uncommon in my work with caregivers that they get worried about their own memory because they are so stressed. So it certainly can have some real impact. And then looking at the possibility of health problems, sleep issues, and fatigue. So it's particularly important when trying to protect yourself against caregiver stress to pay attention to these physical symptoms because they can certainly have some really serious effects for your health personally, but also your ability to continue taking care of your loved one. And those symptoms include blurred vision, stomach irritation, high blood pressure, changes in appetite, and sleeplessness. If you're noticing those, you definitely want to talk to your doctor. Some things to keep in mind overall in terms of maintaining your physical health is hopefully we don't get to the point of having those really serious symptoms that you just saw on the previous slide. Include prioritizing your own health, making sure you get to your well appointments, making sure you get vaccinations, things like that. Trying to establish a good bedtime, those routines that we just talked about for someone living with dementia, those are wonderful for a caregiver as well, to have a regular bedtime, maybe having a routine that might involve some stretching before bedtime, which can, again, help you get ready mentally for bed, but also can benefit your physical well-being and help to manage your stress. Trying to make exercise a part of your daily routine. Ideally, I would say you'd be able to make some exercise be a part of your routine on your own, so you can get some time to yourself, but that's not always possible for caregivers. So even if you can make exercise a part of what you're doing with your loved one, that can help your stress as well, whether that's going for a walk, taking an exercise class at the senior center. And then incorporating, talked a little bit about the importance of nutrition for people living with dementia. It's really important for all of us to maintain our health and reduce our risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. And we could talk a lot in detail about those foods, but keeping in mind that what's good for your heart for food is good for your brain. And if you're interested in learning more about the brain healthy food and the exercise and its impact on the risk of developing dementia, and you're local, please consider coming to our program at the Chelmsford Senior Center next Friday. I put the details about that in the chat, where we're going to be talking all about brain health. In terms of thinking about your emotional health, I think it's important for people to have some relaxation techniques, and particularly ones I think that work in the moment when you're having a stressful day, and whether that's doing deep breathing. I've had a caregiver once tell me that what they did when they were stressed out is they just gave themselves a little space from their loved one, and they watched some funny videos on their phone. There are different relaxation techniques for different people. Maintaining your social connections is important, making sure you've got people that you can talk to about what you're experiencing. While trying to be positive, and trying to convert some of maybe your negative thoughts into positive ones, you also want to be realistic. This is a tough disease. You need to give yourself space to grieve the losses that you're experiencing along the way. I'd also urge you to give yourself some grace. We know that you learned a lot of great tips tonight, and we can't do those all of the time, and that's okay. You know that you're doing your best. I can't tell you how many caregivers I talk to that I am just blown away by the absolutely amazing and sensitive care that they're giving to their loved one, and I'm sure those in the audience are doing the same thing. And if you notice that your stress is particularly high, you're feeling some physical impacts of that, definitely talk to your doctor about that. In terms of your emotional health, I think it's really important to build yourself a support team. Nobody can provide everything that someone living with dementia needs for that entire course of the disease. And it's really important to have a group of people that can help you with care responsibilities over the course of the disease. And that includes healthcare professionals, it includes family and friends, and hopefully it includes some community resources as well. When you're thinking about who you would like to be on your support team, I think it's really important to carefully consider who that is. With family and friends, you want to choose people who are supportive, not people who are overly critical or judgmental about things. You want to have people that are making you feel good about what you're doing. You want to think about what you'd like help with and be specific about that. Many people, I think, want to help out, but they're not sure how to. So definitely giving people something concrete that they can grab onto to help with. And if you're having trouble coming up with that list, talk to a trusted friend and have them help you come up with a list with what you need help for. Try not to take it personally if someone can't help you, and kind of move on to the next person if you can, and think about ways you can appreciate the people helping you. It's also important to take advantage of resources that are out there. There are education programs to help you to learn skills to make caregiving more effective and less stressful. There are wonderful peer support groups to get that emotional support you need, and some advice from other caregivers. Memory cafes for socialization with your loved one and yourself. And there's also some support programs that are specifically focused on the person living with dementia, but that give you as a caregiver time to rest, including day programs where people can go and receive all that one-to-one care they need, and bringing people into the home to provide that care and supervision so that perhaps you can get some time outside of your home. At the Alzheimer's Association, we do offer an array of services at no cost to families who are affected by Alzheimer's and dementia. At the heart of that is our 24/7 helpline. It's available anytime, day or night, to help with problems big and small. I urge you to check that out. The best way to get help is to call, but we're also available by live chat and on our website. We have many different education programs and support groups, both virtually and in person, throughout the country. And we have a really robust website as well with all kinds of information and interactive tools. And if you're looking for an education program support group, can't find something on the website, just call that helpline. And on our 24/7 helpline, we're always pointing people out to services that are happening in their community, where you can find information on where is that adult day health, where is the memory cafe, how can I get some help with paying for those services. So some things to keep in mind include your local council on aging and senior center. If you're living in Massachusetts, you should check out your Aging Services Access Point, or MASS options. There's a wonderful family caregiver support program throughout Massachusetts. There's a new program through Medicare called Guide that you can talk to your primary care physician about. And then the Memory Cafe has a great new directory at the website that's listed here on the slide. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can go to questions.
Great. Well, thank you so very, very much. Louise had a question in the Q&A about should daylight saving be eliminated, and is the Alzheimer's Association lobbying for this change?
That is a very interesting question. And I have not heard that we are lobbying for that change. I will say my part of the house at the Alzheimer's Association is education and caregiver support. So I'm not the one who comes up with our public policy agenda. But that is, in my 20 years at the association, that's not come up. Right now, we have a really exciting state agenda that we're pushing that includes some really important elements for caregivers that may be of interest. One of them being required training for first responders in how to work with people living with dementia, so that if things got to a point where you needed to call for some help because behaviors were really challenging, the first responders would know how to react to that.
Excellent, excellent. I also wanted to just give a shout out to April. Probably about 6 months ago, maybe longer, she helped put together some memory kits that we're using at, she uses both at the senior center, but also that are available for checkout at the Chelmsford Public Library. So April, do you want to just tell a little bit about what's in them and how you find your home health companions or your home companions use those with the folks who enjoy the activities in them? You're on mute, love. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Yes, definitely. Even Sarah touched upon it about the different levels of, ability. So in each kit, there are different levels of things you can do. I believe we have some, I'm wondering if they're in the kits or if we just got them. It's a blank sheet of paper, but if you just brush it with water, the image comes out. So it's kind of like, oil painting or, watercolor painting, but it's just using water and it's very easy. We have puzzles and we only go up to about maybe 50 pieces, or we go down to 24 or even 9. It's just, as Sarah said, it's not so much what you're doing, the activity, it's how you're interacting while you're doing the activity. And a lot of it's an old psychology trick. If two people are doing something and they're looking at something, or even playing with Play-Doh. Play-Doh is in these kits. You're rolling something and you're just talking and you're not looking at each other and you're not quizzing the person like, oh, what did you have for breakfast today? They're just talking, and if you're talking about something from their past, because the long-term memory is more, robust than the short-term, that gets things going. It makes them feel good. And it's about how they feel when they see that companion come in the door. You know, I want them to light up when they see the companion. Other things that are in there, there's something, we've got rope, like Sarah touched upon. You want textile, things that they can touch, feel. We don't have anything in there that smells, but you know, you can always, you know, play with some spices with your loved one and have them just guess what the spice is, you know, have them smell it with their eyes closed or something. But there's something in there with knots, and you know, and have them see if they can untie the paracord and then maybe tie them back up again. You could say, could you help me get these knots out? We don't want to give them busy work. We always want to ask, could you help me with doing this activity? Sometimes, like I said, it's just to get the conversation going and if somebody's doing something. But there are so many items in the kits, and I know we're at 8 o'clock, so I don't want to take up too much time. But there, if you want to check out the kits at the library, definitely check them out and see all the things that are in there to do.
Well, thank you so much. And like Jill said at the beginning, this program, we really appreciate and thank the people who are able to join us live tonight, but also this will be posted on the library's YouTube channel, which you'll be able to view at any time while it's up there. But then Jill is going to send a follow-up email with the link to that recording. And I noticed that in the chat, there were a lot of excellent resources. So I'm not sure if you can retrieve the chat, save it, or maybe just cut and paste it so that you have all that very helpful information that we can also provide for people. And this is a very new program, Thrive, and we are hopeful that we will be able to provide more of these types of informational sessions as well as activities for you and your loved one to participate in. Sarah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if we have time, there was one more question in the Q&A.
Oh, please. Absolutely. I just noticed it down there.
Nicole, if you want, I can read it off and maybe you can help answer. I'm also happy to, but it says here, is there a link between the advancement of dementia and reverting to non-English from childhood? How to bridge that communication obstacle? Because we have seen this happen.
Yeah, it is. It doesn't happen with everybody, but it certainly is pretty common, especially I would say the later in life someone learns English, you know, and the more comfortable they are in that first language, the more likely this is to happen, that people become more comfortable in their first language. And I would say ideally the best solution to that is to, if you can, to speak in the language that they now understand better. Unfortunately, it's going to be difficult to, you know, reteach somebody English, but I know that's not always possible. Maybe no one else in the language speaks it. I would say in that case, you know, try to use simple words as much as possible, gestures when you can, pictures when you can. Be really aware that your body language can often convey so much, that you care, that you're there for them, that you're a welcoming person, and just really kind of lean into those other ways of communicating if that language is an issue. And maybe you can even find music in their language that they had before that doesn't rely on you speaking to really make them feel comfortable.
Or maybe the app on your phone, they have so many, you know, translator apps on the phones, you know, if you want to get technological about it. Yeah.
Try that too. But yes, but have a sense of humor about it. And again, remember that what's probably most important more than the actual words is what you're conveying with your body language and how you're acting, those kinds of things. Yeah.
Great advice.
Definitely.
And several of you touched on the idea that there were many, many topics that we touched on tonight that we could do an entire show, you know, we could do an entire presentation on. One of them being blue light, and you were talking about tech, that idea of minimizing blue light, you know, the light that's emitted from your device when it's not on dark mode at sleep time. I know a lot of people take their device to bed to help them fall asleep, but really that bombardment of blue light sometimes can make it more difficult to fall asleep. And so the
A good habit, no.
Yeah, and we just got another quick chat in. Excellent question, Josephine. How do you handle when the person can't remember the words to speak? Who wants to take that one? It's a tricky one.
I can take a stab. I'm sure we all have ideas around this. One thing I will say, I'll share this with the library because I know they're going to send a follow-up email. We have a wonderful caregiver series that, and two programs in particular, I think would complement this nicely. We urge you to join. One is about communication, and then one's about behavior. So I'll make sure that we have that link to share with you. But when I would just emphasize when a person is having trouble with the words, it's really important to both look to their behavior and what are they trying to tell you with how they're acting, and then with the reaction you're giving, they might be able to understand you a little bit, but I'd keep it simple. Be very patient, use gestures when you can, and again, be aware of your body language. And I would say when you sometimes you do all that, you're still having trouble figuring out something specific, just respond to the emotion you're seeing. If the person seems excited, get excited with them, say some vague things about so glad to see you, so happy today. Like that makes me happy too. If someone seems scared, reminding them they're safe and doing things you would do to make them feel safe. If they're angry, a lot of times just apologizing, even if you don't know what somebody is angry about, can make a really big difference. An honest apology makes us all feel better when we're like that. So I think, keeping those things in mind, I would say. And I could talk about communication for another hour, but.
Great advice, though. It's all in the validation, Nicole. That was a great stab.
Yeah.
All right. Well, in the follow-up survey that you'll get, there is a little spot in there for you to add ideas about programming that you'd like to see this group take on. So feel free to fill that out when you get that. Even if you were unable to, if you're watching this on YouTube as a recording, you'll still get the link and you'll still get that. Hopefully you'll get a link to the survey as well to give your input. So I'd like to thank Sarah, Nicole, April. Thank you all so very much for making this inaugural event so successful and so meaningful to those folks in the community. As Sarah mentioned before we came on board tonight, there is a definite need in the community for these topics to be addressed. And, the Senior Center and Alzheimer's Association chapters are really here to provide support and resources. So we thank you all very much for joining. Jill, do you have any parting?
Putting this together. We really needed a memory cafe, in Chelmsford, and calling it Thrive is awesome. I think that's wonderful. I love the name.
Great.
So thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Anything to add, Jill? Are you all set? We thank the library so much.
Oh, great. Well, it is exciting. We've been looking just something to do that is going to provide that service for people here. And with those memory kits are in our library of things. Please ask for them. I did have someone ask one time, they were like, I didn't even know you had these. So it was really exciting. So, and I have all the notes and things to share with everybody who's registered. So when you do get that, please tell other people about upcoming programs that you might know that didn't know about this, and you could share the video with them as well. So very excited, and thanks to everybody who came on the panel, and thanks to Janine for helping to spearhead this.
Great. And I'm just going to move to the side because Jill made our beautiful logo.
Yeah.
So thank you. So it was a wonderful collaborative effort, and I'm quite happy it kind of all came together tonight. So thank you all so much for watching, and have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank
Good night,
you.
everyone.
Good night.
Night.